Tier 2 esports has some serious problems, and since Acend pulled out of the Valorant space, there's been multiple other teams both in Europe and North America that have done the same. So today I want to gather the CEO of Acend, Ben, and the general manager of Esports, Krimson, to discuss some of the things that we think could improve the space for orgs, players, and everyone else involved.
I mean, I think for me, looking at really big picture, looking at tier two in general in all esports and applying it to Valorant as well, right? Is you need to kind of have a situation where there is a benefit for tier two teams, organizations to participate in tier two, right? I mean, that sounds obvious, but I think it's completely lacking in Valorant, as we've sort of previously discussed, that there is not anything for you to gain. There's something for one team to gain for 1 year when you ascend, right? And every other team is basically gaining almost nothing, right? There is a real lack of viewership in tier two. There's a lack of prize money in tier two. There's a lack of infrastructure in tier two. There's lands cancelled. There's off-season tournaments cancelled. There's prize money not being paid out. All of these things are negative, 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 and the positives are just not there, right? And I would question Riot or anyone who says that tier two is doing well or on the way up or whatever to bring any positives to participating in tier two to the table, because that's why we left, because we just don't see any of those positives. And for me, I think the way in which the whole thing is organized in the Riot ecosystem, money comes in mostly to Riot because they sell the most sponsorships, they sell the game stuff, right? All of this is a marketing endeavor for Riot, the esports side of things. If they want esports to succeed, it helps them grow the game. That's why they're putting money into it, right? And then that money from Riot doesn't go down into the teams in any way, right? The money goes maybe to VCT teams with some of the stipends that they pay out, but outside of that, nothing goes down into tier two. That money is expected to be generated by the tier two TOs who are running the tournaments and paying out prize money to the teams. They have to bring that money to tier two. And as far as I understand it, Riot puts nothing into tier two as a result of that, right? Unless they are funding the tournament organizers in some way that we don't know about. But again, as I understand it, Riot, none of that money from Riot goes into tier two. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that Riot should be funding some of the tier two endeavors, whether it be helping out TOs to run LANs, helping to pay the prize pool, helping to organize tournaments in the off season. There's so much that they could do. And the fact that they don't do that suggests to me that, they don't care as much about tier two as they say they do. And they don't really want to invest in it. They don't believe in investing in it to improve it. So we're already at an impasse there when the developer who controls the entire ecosystem says, hey, we don't want to invest in tier two. So why should we, frankly?
The viewership is obviously a massive driving force behind everything in esports. And in tier two, it's abysmal, especially in Europe, because Europe is so fragmented into, 9 different leagues or something like that, with each of their own little sort of sub-regions. How do you fix the viewership problem of tier two? Is there anything? I mean, I think consolidating to one main challengers league probably would help. Maybe having the games have more stake, because I mean, let's be honest, the Surge League, who cares? the games nobody cares about tier two until Ascension. So there's no stakes really for anybody unless you're a fan of a specific team. So I think there's some really serious problems just at the viewership level, and probably that's maybe the number one lever that you could pull with Riot is if there was people actually invested in the tier two ecosystem from a fan perspective, maybe they would be more interested. So what are your thoughts on viewership in tier two, and is there a solution for that?
I think you just make it one. I mean, if you want to have multiple regions, have them at least English speaking. Why on earth do you have the Eastern European stream on Polish? Why?
Yeah.
You have so many international fans that watch Ascend. Our main audience is probably all around the world, a lot of German fans from DACH, from UK because of TV, and then it's in Polish. I don't get it. People from Russia don't speak Polish. People from Bulgaria don't speak Polish and probably don't understand it, from Slovakia, from Slovenia, from Macedonia. It just doesn't make any sense. And I think for all of the other regions, I think it would help slightly, but just make it one region. This would solve so many issues. Whoever is running then the Challenger League for Europe, you have so much more viewership because now you're assembling all the regions into one super region. Yes, it will come to the price that you will have less teams competing, but I think it's totally fair to say, all right, you pick the 2-3 best teams from each region and you make it one. You can do a play, and at the beginning of the season to qualify, you maybe have some direct invites for orgs that are really investing, and then maybe for each region you have a play-in slot. Obviously you want to have orgs that pay. It's fair to say, all right, you guys, for your past success or past investments, you get a slot for a year and then it reevaluates. A bit of a light franchise system, so to say. All right, it gives stability to the orgs that are investing. I think we can count the orgs on both hands that are investing relatively much money into tier 2. And then you have the play-in for free agent teams, for teams that maybe cannot afford it to invest that much yet. So they also get a chance to, get a slot in, and then you have one slot per region and not just one slot like it is for Ascension for VCT. And that's a lot fairer, a lot more sustainable. Now, as an org, if you consider investing into tier 2, we could get one slot in DACH or in Surge, and there are basically 5-6 slots available. That makes it more attractive. You have an event at the beginning of the year that is quite attractive, where there's already something at stake. And then remember, we had this open qualifier bracket for qualifying for VCT Europe, where this was, I think, 2 qualification stages. We failed the first one, and then we secured a slot in the second one. You can do something similar at the beginning of the season for the Challenger League. That would help with viewership. It would help for sponsorships, because instead of 800 viewers, you would probably have 5 to 15K viewers for some of the matches. If some teams there's still some pretty big fan bases in France and Spain, and if they play against big orgs from DACH or from Eastern Europe, from Surge or like Ascend, that would probably attract a lot of viewers. And then, you have like a whole season, you have 2 splits, 3 splits ideally, obviously, throughout the entire year. And I also think increasing the slots from 1 to 2 for the franchise model doesn't hurt either. I think, but my philosophy, there's something, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, why they are doing this in different regions, why they have 5, 6, 7 different regions. I mean, it's kind of like a franchise, right? You give the license to a TO, they have the permission to run the tournament, and then it's there on their agenda to find sponsors, right? To monetize that league.
Yeah.
And then I think it makes sense. You have an incentive to do multiple regions, because now you can sell the same product to 7, 8, 9 different customers for probably a significant price, right? So there's more incentive to sell it to different regions than just doing one big league, in my opinion. I guess that's the reason behind it. I don't know if you guys see any other reason. I don't, but
no, I think it's just that, plus the idea of having this like regional fan base in the Spanish, scene, people speaking Spanish, but they're already eroding that over time as they realize it's not possible anymore, right? As they merge in Portugal into Spain, well, the Portuguese don't speak Spanish, right? So what are you going to do? You're still going to do the broadcast in Spanish, and you're just going to ignore the Portuguese fans now, right? And that's the same as you said with Surge. We're going to do, and it should be frank here, like the Polish broadcast, the East Surge TO is not allowed to do it in English. That's Riot's decision, right?
Who the fuck is sitting there and saying, you know what? No, you have to continue speaking in Polish because I threw the dices and it said 2 6s. So we have to like what? Literally, like who the fuck is sitting there and making the decisions? I don't get it. Why Polish? Why? Please explain to me.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that they have to pitch it to Riot as, hey, we're a Polish TO, which and therefore we can do the cast in Polish. And I think the idea is that it doesn't therefore contest with Polaris which is the Nordic one, which is in English. They
It's
don't want.
just
But
it just
obviously, I'm giving excuses as if I'm Riot, right? Like it doesn't make any sense to me.
yeah.
It's something that we constantly pushed back on against Surge, saying like you are representing one of the 15 countries in this league because one of the countries speaks Polish and the other
Yeah.
the other 14 countries do not speak Polish. Like what? This does not make sense, you know? And there is a good Polish fan base for Valorant. Don't get me wrong, but there are people in other countries who are supporting their teams. You know, we saw like a Hungarian team with 5 Hungarian players that always had a big Hungarian fan base. They don't speak Polish, so they're not going to watch the stream in Polish, or if they are, they're going to mute it. They're not going to be as engaged. They're not going to bring that fan base to, you know, the ecosystem as you would want them to. So yeah, I think there's many weird choices that have been put in place to try and foster like some kind of regional fan base system where, you know, and in some regions I think it works, where Spain has a really dedicated Spanish speaking fan base, great. In France also a really dedicated French speaking fan base, great. But for the other regions that just doesn't make sense and completely like dilutes the amount of money that's available, because as you said, it's down to sponsorships, it's down to TOs to find sponsorships, and if there is a finite amount of money available to be invested by sponsors into tier 2, then by spreading it across 7, 8, 9 leagues, you are giving almost nothing to anyone. Whereas if you consolidate it into a single league, there's maybe enough money now to support the orgs, and the orgs bring also the viewers in the first place, right?
Right.
So yeah.
And also, I will say that, you know, I don't know. I don't want to do too much like sort of, you know, speculation on what Riot's motives and stuff are. But to me, it would make so much more sense to just find a very solid TO in Europe and have them run a Challengers League, as opposed to, you know, and no offense to some of the TOs that are running these small regional leagues, but the broadcasts are, you know, extremely Spartan. A lot of them have problems with audio and various observer. Like, if you just have one solid product, you know, it's obviously going to be way better than like 9 fragmented, you know, varying quality products. And especially now that you have like the Premier system, it seems like you should really just kind of like roll the regional stuff down to tier 3 where nobody really cares except for the people that are in the region. And then just have something that's like legitimately good that people would be interested in. Because people do care about the up and coming players, you know, like the small streamers, like they have their fans and they develop them over time. You know, you see people like becoming fans of a player like Kayak on Apex, and like now when he goes into VCT, he's going to have a fan base because he cultivated a fan base by playing in this league with a little bit of exposure. But you'd have more of these if there was more international play. I think it's like no surprise that things become more hype when you have the 1 or 2 best French teams playing against the best German team, playing against the best, you know, Italian team. And that only happens at Ascension, but that's all people actually want to see. You know, I feel like having, you know, 1 or 2 good teams beating up on 5 or 6 bad teams in one tiny region is just so pointless. Like there's no point in having, you know, Desire absolutely stomp, you know, 6 or 7 other terrible Italian teams for 6 months, and then they come and play like 5 meaningful games in Ascension, and that's it. Like what is the purpose of that? It makes no sense to me from a product standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, or to add, they will be a system next year where there is more international play, right, coming in with these like post. You now get points by going to this like cross regional tournament, which I think is a really good idea. A little bit too late, and you still have to play your way through the much less meaningful league to get there, right? But there will be like more opportunities next year, just to, you know, clear it so that we're not, you know, completely.
I think this is something where this is exactly what I mean. It's just way too late. This is just, as you just said, this is where if you observe the scene, fuck, orgs are leaving. It's not good. All right, let's do an international event at the end of the year, Christmas event, November event, a big tournament. Also, we chunk it up with a bit of a prize pool, maybe run it over multiple weekends. We have a play-in system. That's what, not next year. It's not like in tier 2, all right, yeah, of course. Like we have the money to constantly pay 20, 30K salaries every month to our team, you know. We wait until then we can compete for a 50K prize pool tournament where it's like 20K for first, and then depending on what contracts you have, you maybe get a 10, 20, or 30% cut of it. Yeah, thank you. It's just way too late. And this is where I don't understand who's making the decisions for T2 esports there, but just thinking it a little bit through, crunching some numbers and understand, hey, we got to step in, because then ultimately you will just have orgs leaving, going into different games, being in fewer games, investing in their content creators, pivoting somewhere else. And at the end of the day, it's going to be at the back of the players. I mean, I don't want to know how many great talents are remaining unsigned, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy to me. I saw a tweet from this guy from Diamond, the top fragger in tier
Yeah.
2 in a competitive league in Search, that still didn't get any offers, right? And this is what you're going to see constantly. He's shooting hard, he's playing well, but nobody cares because there are no orgs that are going to be paying the salaries. And these are kids that have been sacrificing, dedicating their lives to make it as a pro, that you as a fan, as a viewer, want to see. It's not the org's fault, it's not the player's fault. It's just that there is an organization that unfortunately doesn't have an interest to make it somewhat sustainable. And then it's going to be at the expense of those players.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, building on what you said about sort of the decision-making stuff, and perhaps I'm cynical about it, right? But I can only see two scenarios in the way in which Tier 2 is run. Like, either Riot don't know what they're doing, or they know what they're doing and they're choosing this path to not support Tier 2, right? And in both those scenarios, I think it's bad, right? Either Riot doesn't understand what they're doing when they're managing Tier 2, which is bad because that means the developer is way out of touch, or the other option is they 100% know. And I'm leaning towards the fact that they know and they don't care, and that is possibly the worst of the two outcomes. I'm not sure, but I don't believe that there's a bunch of people working at Riot Esports who've cultivated League of Legends to the extent that they have, and they don't realize what's happening. I don't think that's the case. I think that they all 100% know, and whether it's their fault or whether there's I'm sure there's a chain of command that goes up where they can't get the investments that, the company, the chair people, the big bosses say, no, we're not putting any money into this. Then, that just really kills my, what's the word? Motivation to continue in the scene when I think that there is not going to be support from Riot for Tier 2 in the future. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's a big U-turn and they turn around and say, hey, actually, yeah, we were bad. We did it wrong. It didn't work out. All the orgs are leaving. So we're really going to push to make orgs, find a great home here and blah, blah, blah. And they're going to put all this money in. But I don't see it happening. And, and I imagine, just because we have seen previously in League of Legends, that Tier 2 will just become a holding ground for a bunch of unsigned teams or very, smaller orgs, low viewership, and that'll all it'll ever be, and that's my negative view on it, and I hope I'm wrong, but I really thought that Valorant had such a good opportunity for new players to come into esports to
it was crazy. I was looking at the Masters 1 team list in North America, and there was 32 signed teams. 32 signed teams.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. It was and every single esports org that I've seen in every other game, Space Station Gaming, who's only in Halo and Rocket League or whatever, was there. And Dark Zero and FlyQuest, every team there was that you could possibly imagine. And I mean, obviously everybody was fighting for the franchise spots.
Yeah,
but
exactly,
still, it was probably the most healthy esports ecosystem I have ever seen in terms of the amount of teams that were salaried at that point.
Yeah. And now that and we move on a few years later, and we see that like Ben said, if you discount the VCT teams, you can count on two hands the amount of orgs left in EU, and I'm sure that there will be less than that in the next 6 months to a year. And it's really sad for this kind of game where it is super popular with the younger generation, and it's the opportunity for the younger generation to get into esports and become professional players. But you cannot be a professional player if nobody is paying you salary. You know, you will just always be a semi-professional who also has to go to school, who also has to go and do a job, and can never dedicate themselves fully to the game. And that means that the talent will, you know, wither and dry up because you can't dedicate yourself to the game. And it's crazy to me that there is this much potential in a game that's not being taken advantage of by Riot. But hey, you know, they control them. They pull the strings at the end of the day. So who am I to, you know, to tell them what to do? But yeah,
cool. And yeah, maybe we should have a deeper discussion about like the esports contract and like signing players and that type of stuff, because I feel like that's an area where nobody talks about it. You know, there's all this hype around roster moves and all this stuff, but nobody really understands what's going on behind the scenes. And maybe you guys can pull back the curtain a little bit and talk about that as well. So stay tuned.